Welcome. Happy Tuesday. Happy almost end of June. We're really excited to chat a little bit about hosting virtual events for families. So today we're going to provide an overview of what virtual events are, what it means to host a virtual event, why they're important and why they matter. And we're also going to hear from a couple of programs, center-based programs, who have hosted virtual events. The goal of hearing from them will be so that you can learn from people that are actually doing the work every single day, and so that you can ask them questions so you can really get a sense of how to do it if this is an area of interest for you. So once again, welcome. We are happy to see everybody. For some of you, this is our first time meeting, and I will introduce myself in a little bit. And for others of you, it's nice to see you or chat with you again. A few friendly reminders before we move forward. We definitely want you to interact with us. For the purposes of the recording, we're going to have everybody on mute. But we definitely want you to interact with us. So please use the different emotion features. I believe there's that clapping hands, there's a thumbs up, there's a raise hand feature. If you're on a computer, you'll be able, if you're on a laptop, you'll be able to see those features in your participant list. So you just have to open up the participant list. If you're on a phone, you're gonna have to tap the 3 dots that are next to your name in the participant list. You'll be able to see them there. Or if you don't see any of those, you can comment in the chat. Interact with us via chat. There will be opportunities where I will be asking questions for you to share your experiences in the chat, and we really hope to get your feedback. We also ask that you share your complete name for attendance purposes, right where your picture is. We're also going to provide opportunities for you to write your name in the chat box a little bit later so that you have the chance to let your presence be known, as well as receive credit for the time that you spent today. Please let us know when you want to share via the chat box or via the raised hand feature. I get all of those notifications. I'm not able to keep the chat box open for entirely, but throughout the presentation, I will make sure to open it so that I can see your comments and I can see your questions, and I can really create an experience that supports your learning. And the last friendly reminder is that we're here to support your learning. We want to make sure that you walk away with all of the information that you need, and that you walk away with all of your questions asked. I'm happy to stay on the line to answer questions after the presentation. I can also answer questions directly if you type them in the chat box, but we definitely are here to support you. We're here to learn from one another, and we're here to have a really awesome experience together. So I noticed a few of you are doing it already, but I'm going to go ahead and issue the formal ask. In the chat box, if you could please introduce yourself so that everybody knows who's here, what organization or role, what program you work for, and then maybe what city you live or work in right now. And while we're doing that, I will formally introduce myself. My name is Wendeley Escobar. I am the Family Education Coordinator for the Child Care Alliance of Los Angeles, specifically for Quality Start Los Angeles. I've been with the agency about 4 years now, and my role is to do this, to provide training and professional development around family engagement, around best practices for supporting families, around how to build strong families, and around how to really create programs that support family engagement programs, but also at home as well. For those of you that haven't seen me in a while, or if you were in an in-person training sometime before March, my exciting update is that my title is now formally Dr. Wendeley Escobar. I successfully defended my dissertation. I graduated graduated in May of this year. And I am enjoying having a whole lot more free time now that I don't have homework. So I see in the chat box that we have representation from Pasadena, Sylmar, West Covina. I see Rancho Cucamonga. I see Lancaster, Long Beach, Los Angeles, South Los Angeles, East Los Angeles, all corners of Los Angeles County, which is really, really exciting. There's some FCCs, there's some center-based programs, there's school districts, there's private programs on here. It is a pleasure to see all of you, quote unquote. It is a pleasure to host all of you. And I hope that you all get a chance to learn a little something today over the course of our time together. So I want to go ahead and start with an icebreaker. There are some polls that I'm going to launch. So the first question that I'm going to go ahead and ask you is, what types of virtual events have you attended for work or personally? So I've launched the poll. It should have popped up on your screen. You can go ahead and pick any of the different options that are provided. I see people have attended trainings, webinars, and conferences virtually, interviews and panel discussions, some large group gatherings, some small group gatherings, some tutorials. About half have answered, so I'm going to go ahead and give about 30 more seconds for everybody else to answer. By far, the most is trainings, webinars, and conferences. And what's interesting is that previously, before this social distancing and this pandemic happened, we had the option to attend online trainings. But definitely this opportunity, this social distancing has provided us an opportunity to really immerse ourselves in what it means to attend a virtual event. So before we can really think about what kinds of virtual events we want our families to attend, we definitely want to think about our own personal experiences. So I'm going to go ahead and end the poll, and I'm going to share the results with everybody. As you can see, trainings, webinars, and conferences are by far the most popular. How-tos and tutorials seem to be the least popular. But if any of you watch YouTube, typically those are how-tos and tutorials. So whether it's watching a video to learn how to cook something, or to learn how to do something, to learn how to in our family, well, for my son, YouTube is mostly to how to learn how to play video games. For myself, it's different recipes. And for my husband, it's learning about different like historical events and news that have happened. So those are how-tos and tutorials. And then there's also interviews and panel discussions that some have attended. Quite a few of you have attended small group meetings and one-on-ones. So it's important for us to note that the difference between a one-on-one and small group meetings and large group events is that for the purposes of being online, small group meetings are for the purposes of sharing information. Typically, it's about providing updates. It's about sharing with parents information. It's about letting them know how things are going, things like that. Large group events are typically more for socializing. So whether they're read aloud story times where a large group can gather and just watch and interact. We've had virtual school readiness events that I've seen launching. So lots of different events that we see. So now with these results in mind, I want to go ahead and ask all of you the second polling question. What types of virtual events have you personally hosted in your program? So go ahead and take a look. They're the same options in the same order. So go ahead and respond based on what you've done. If you haven't done anything or have not been comfortable in terms of doing virtual events, that's totally okay. This just gives us a sense of who's doing what to kind of tailor some of the information. Awesome. So we have lots of small group meetings. Well, some small group meetings. Let's see, we have a few large group meetings, socializing events. So out of curiosity, if you could type in the chat, if you've done a large group event, can you tell us what the theme of that event was? Was it a STEM, literacy? Was it a read aloud? I think knowing what topics have been presented in a large group format is really, really helpful to everybody. Awesome. Let's see, we see some how-to tutorials. Nobody has done a behind the scenes tour, which is okay. As we come up to this new school year, that might be something that you end up having to do because of social distancing requirements and because of parents not really being allowed into programs to see them. Tours still are a very important part of how families choose childcare. And so just because you haven't done it doesn't mean you can't, but really keep in mind that providing a behind the scenes tour for families that are interested in your program to post online or to send out via email, it really provides an awesome touch. So I'm gonna go ahead and end the poll and share the results. I see that people are doing small Zoom connections twice a week with families. There's a story time, there's Zoom class meetings, there's literally small group, literacy small groups. Let's see, parent conferences have been done virtually, large group events on reopening regulations, got it. So even though it's a large event, technically the purpose is to share information and then have a question and answer session. It's important to keep in mind that when it comes to virtual events, and we'll talk about this in a little bit, but the number of people that you have at your event is really, really important. It's really important for you to really think about how do you moderate these virtual events. It's important for you to think about how do you engage with families, how do you answer questions, and how do you create a space where families feel safe enough to share, to ask their questions, and to interact with you. So if we're talking about kind of reopening regulations, it's definitely great to have that out to all families, but also think about what small group or class specific opportunities can you provide to families in smaller groups, where they can maybe share some of their concerns in a way that might not be so intimidating in front of a large group. One of the things that we value is small groups. When it comes to virtual settings, for us, 30 to 40 is really the max on any given event. We know that sometimes there are hundreds on virtual events, especially when it comes to, a lot of our political briefings. A lot of our conferences have had hundreds of people on these virtual events, and that's great. But also keep in mind as you're planning, how can you create a more personal space for families that allows them to interact so that you can really connect with them and not just share a large amount of information and kind of turn them off to their own, send them off to their own devices. So now let's talk some specifics. Hosting virtual events for families. So what is a virtual event? Even before this pandemic, virtual events were popular. We just really didn't consider them virtual events. Platforms like YouTube, platforms like TikTok, platforms like a Google Hangout, Dojo, all provide opportunities for virtual events. It's It's now that we're really having to focus on those platforms and those mediums because we have no other options. So a virtual event, in essence, is any online activity, whether it's via Zoom, Google Hangouts, Class Dojo, or any other online platform that provides programs the opportunity to have conversations and share information with families in an interactive way. So the key to remember about virtual events is that they can be live, but they can also be pre-recorded. Please don't feel like you have to go live every single time you want to do a virtual event. You can pre-record a story time and send it out via email. You can pre-record a behind the scenes tour and post it on your website. You can do a Twitter chat with families and post questions and allow families to tweet and retweet responses as a means of engagement. You can start an Instagram chat. You can start an Instagram or Facebook or Twitter hashtag. These are all online activities that serve to share information with families, but also to engage in conversations in ways that are non-traditional, right? So they can be live, they can also be pre-recorded. And really the purpose of a virtual event is to provide families with alternative methods for engaging during program events when their schedule does not allow them to do so. So the reason why we picked this topic is because it's really timely right now. However, when we're back to normal, when all restrictions are lifted, the goal for us is that virtual events don't disappear. And it's important to have virtual events because they serve a different need than in-person events do. Okay? There are some families that love the in-person events. They go to all workshops. They seek to engage with families in person all the time. There are some families, however, who in-person events don't work for them. It's whether it's their work schedule, they work graveyard, they have a baby at home, they're having a challenging pregnancy and can't leave the house, they're a caregiver for somebody at home. So all of those different extenuating circumstances. And also bear in mind that it doesn't have to be an extenuating circumstance. Sometimes families simply don't feel comfortable coming into your space. And that's okay, right? They still deserve to have access to the information that you have or are providing in these meetings. And that's really where virtual events come in. So virtual events serve to do a variety of things in your program. First and foremost, they serve to promote equity. Remember, if you've been following our family engagement tips, back in January, we talked about the difference between equity and equality. And so it's important to remember, it's important to note that equity is about providing supports to individual families based on their need. Equality is about providing the same support to everybody and expecting everybody to either accept it or not accept it. And so when it comes to high quality programming, we want to focus on equity. And virtual events allow you an opportunity to provide equitable access to families across circumstances, across personality types, and across different situations. Right? We don't necessarily need to have a reason as to why one family can't attend an in-person event or doesn't want to. The point is that if we want to have a really high quality program, virtual events should be here to stay, and they should really be planned with every family in mind, so that families have access to the information, right? Hosting virtual events also serve to stretch a limited budget. Some of us have a budget for family engagement and for workshops and for outside presenters. Or some of us have the budget to pay for extra childcare or to keep the center open. But some programs really don't. There are also some programs who, they know that their families can only attend from 6:30 to 7:30, but they just can't keep the center open because of whatever regulations. That's where virtual events come in. Virtual events not only serve to stretch a limited budget, but they serve to expand upon the limitations that might exist in your program, right? So when you have a virtual event, you don't have to pay for childcare. You can host the virtual event anytime you want. You can pre-record it during the day with teachers or without teachers or with whoever is there, and then send it out in the evening and allow families to watch on their own time. So virtual events really serve, fill a need when it comes to having a limited budget. And virtual events also continue the work of family engagement when distance is a factor. Outside of this pandemic, sometimes families go on vacation. Sometimes parents get sick. Sometimes families have to leave the country because of a death in the family or because of a family emergency. And so host virtual events, you're able to reach families equitably where they are based on their needs and not necessarily based on the fact that they can come into your program or your setting, right? I noticed a comment that said that there are some parents that don't have access to the computer and prefer to the use of iPhone FaceTime. That's a virtual event. It's a one-on-one small group event, and that's totally okay. Remember that that use of iPhone FaceTime or the use of virtual events is based on family's preference. And so there are some families that, yes, they prefer to text or a phone call to check in. There are some families that can stop by to talk to you in the morning or in the evening. There are some families who they drop off first thing in the morning before you show up to work, and they pick up after you're done with your day, right? So virtual events really serve to meet the unique needs of the families in your program, and it's really based on their preferences. So virtual events can be used to support family engagement efforts year-round. I want to make sure that if you take away anything, take away the fact that virtual events are not just for this time. Virtual events are year-round. Virtual events serve to support families regardless of whether they can come in person or they can't come in person. And as you start expanding your level of comfort with virtual events and virtual offerings, you're going to see that it's sometimes a little bit easier. I will say, just from our perspective, yes, there's still a lot of details that go into planning virtual events like these, but it's nowhere near the details nor the budget that it took to put on in-person events. And so this has given us an opportunity to really realize and see that sometimes people just can't come in person, right? If we had done this in person, those of you that live in Sylmar, Lancaster, in the farthest reaches of the county, probably wouldn't have been able to make it to Eagle Rock, our office, at 12:30 in the middle of the week. But because of the virtual event and us being virtual, some of you are logging in during nap time, during your lunchtime. Some of you were able to listen in while you're doing other things. And so just as that virtual events are accommodating for you, they serve the same need. They fit the same need for the families in your program. So really consider that as you're planning. Now, there are 3 key strategies for success when hosting a virtual event. And our 2 guest speakers today will touch on each one of these in their own unique way. But first and foremost, we want to make sure that you do your research. Know what you're doing, know what your purpose is, ask the families what they prefer, and use that to inform your planning. Another key strategy is to leverage your existing resources. What do you already have that might support your virtual event, right? Do you already have FaceTime? Do you already have Google? Do you already have Class Dojo? Do you already have Remind? What do you already have that can support a virtual meeting, a virtual training, a virtual conference to connect with families. And then the final key to success is to be flexible. It's never going to look the way you want it to look. Not everyone's going to attend. You could have in-person meetings and virtual meetings. You could record everything. You could do everything simultaneously, and there will always be families that are just not interested. That's okay. The key with virtual events is that you get a chance to reach more families than you would have with just in-person offerings. And flexibility, just as flexibility is important with working with families in general, flexibility when hosting virtual events is absolutely key. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take a few minutes, to hear from some center-based programs that are actually doing virtual events. So as you hear from them, feel free to shoot questions in the group chat, and we will be monitoring the chat so that we can ask them those questions. Our first expert is Miss Sandra Flores. She is the center director for a center at Alma Family Services. So if Miss Sandra, if you could unmute yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. So welcome. There are a few questions, and I'm just going to go ahead and ask you the questions one by one,
okay,
so you can hear. And then if there's anything that you want to add at the end, feel free to do so. Okay? So the first question that we have is, how do you prepare to host a virtual event? What goes into the planning?
So one of our first virtual events that we hosted was the Parent Cafe, and it was literally the same format that we utilized if it was going to be a face-to-face, except that it was going to be through Zoom virtually. We started planning for this event like most typical events we do at the center a month in advance. So once we do that, we put it into the newsletter/calendar. We give it to the parents. That way they have enough time to also plan their day and to join the event. A week as it gets closer, I do a flyer. I use the Pick Collage app, which is really nice to use because you're able to make it very attractive. I use the parents' language, so it was English and in Spanish, and I divided it into 4 flyers. So I had English, Spanish for the morning class, English, Spanish for the afternoon class. And I also put an image of a sweet bread and some coffee because it was a parent cafe, and literally I told the parents, you could drink your coffee, you could eat your breakfast as we're listening to each other. So it's a month in advance of planning.
Awesome. And it sounds like across that month, you still give families reminders to make sure that they're aware that it's coming.
Yes.
Awesome. So when it came to planning, how did you know that the Parent Cafe was something that families would be interested in?
I think what's really key is the relationships you have with the families. Mm-hmm. So something that we've been working on is relationship and trust. If I didn't have their trust and that strong relationship with the families to begin with, I don't think our event would have been that successful. So knowing the families, using surveys, speaking to them face-to-face, and even using FaceTime Zoom now, it's still working, and we're still building trust and relationships, giving them the support, the resources they need, just being another extra hand to them. As a director, I have access, and I am a salary employee, so I'm literally accessible 24/7 to them as needed. And that's okay because that's my role as a director. But relationships are key for all events to be successful.
Awesome, thank you. So how did your families respond to the cafe? What was the feedback that you got from them afterwards?
We had done a parent cafe back in December of 2019, and we had 36 families from 48 families join us. Now with this virtual cafe that we did back in May, we had a total of 23 families from 48 join us. And that's okay. because we need to praise everybody that was able to make it. And I also recorded myself for the families that were not able to see it. They were happy. I think what mattered the most during our session was that it was a cafe for them. It was a safe space environment for them to vent, to check in. And we spoke about COVID, we spoke about learning, we spoke about art, we spoke about any concerns they had at the moment. And what was very exciting is that we were able to do breakout sessions.
So and into the future, what were some major successes that you can share, and what are some lessons that you learned along the way?
I think the success was that the parents were able to join the breakout sessions and they were able to have open discussion and dialogue with each other. I had some parents that had not really interacted with each other, and virtually they were able to do that. So that was a success. Moving forward, I think this is going to be a platform that we're going to start using at the center. And even before COVID-19, I had already implemented a policy for this new school year of actually recording our parent advisory committee meetings, our meetings or informal sessions that sometimes we have with parents, so that the other parents that are not able to join could always get it via email, or they could log into our webpage. So I feel that virtually everything is also being flexible and also going along with the flow of the dialogue of the parents. So I could have an agenda, but if at the moment the parents had something else to state, I let them do it, because right now that's what they need. They need our support, and we need to be mindful of what their feelings are and their emotions are, and also just be that person that they could speak to.
Awesome. Thank you. Is there anything else about your experience that you feel would be valuable for the providers on this call to hear about?
Just keep trying. As stated before, some parents did mention to me that virtually is not the same as face-to-face. And that could be true for some, but other ones stated the opposite, that, oh my God, during parent meetings, I'm usually shy, but if I'm behind a computer, I'm able to speak more. I liked it. I like how I was able to dialogue. I like how nobody judged me or nobody made faces, and we were all there just as cheerleaders to support each other. I think if you see the dynamics of your families, and like I stated before, the relationship and the trust is a must. That has to happen day one, during intake, during your surveys, during the tour. Remember, your image is the first impression that families see. So in order to be successful, you need to have that trust in the families.
Absolutely. And thank you for sharing that. Thank you for sharing the importance of trust, and how it starts. It starts from the beginning, but it's something that continues through every single interaction that you have with them. So thank you for that. And just one final question for you. You personally, as a center director, how has the adjustment been for you in terms of hosting virtual events and going from in-person to virtual? How have you adjusted, and what have you learned about yourself personally?
I think the adjustment piece, because I do consider myself very flexible, I was able to adapt to it. But also having those relationships with the parents have assisted me as a process of making it's an easier process to adjust now to virtual. So face-to-face is great, right? But now that it's virtual, it's also great because I still see the families. We still have the trust. We're still having that communication. And at the end of the day, I am their mentor, and they do look up to us as directors and also teachers, because I also have been doing the teaching now. And now they're seeing two perspectives of a director, but I'm also a mom. So I put myself into so many hats that at the end of the day, the parents do see it, and and as a human as well, because we're all humans. And when we were doing the virtual cafe, I think somebody called and it interjected in my in my laptop, because I do have a Mac. And the parents were like, well, what happened? And I'm like, it's okay, let's just brush it off. I declined it, and let's move forward. So being also able to improvise as we're going, and that they see that you have that, well, that courage and that and that vulnerability to also be able to make mistakes, is what I think is I'm able to use right now for adaptability as well.
Awesome. Thank you very much for sharing, Miss Sandra. Thank you for being willing to share. We really, really appreciate it. If anybody has any follow-up questions for Miss Sandra, please feel free to type them in the group chat. We'll have an opportunity after we hear from our next guest speaker to come back as a group and ask questions and share a little bit more, and maybe hear from both of them a little bit more. So thank you, thank you.
You're welcome.
Our next guest speaker is Miss Stacey Smith-Clark. Stacey, if you want to go ahead and unmute yourself. She is the Center Director for the Long Beach City College Child Development Center and Learning Lab at the Pacific Coast campus. For those of you that are not familiar with LBCC, they have two different campuses, and so she is the Center Director for one of them. Welcome, Miss Stacey. It's a pleasure to have you today.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. Hi, everybody.
Of course. So we're going to go ahead and start off with the same questions for you. The first question is, how did you prepare to host the event, the virtual events that you've hosted for families? And on your end, as being, part of kind of a larger campus and a larger organization, what goes into that planning?
Well, the first thing, I had a lot of anxiety around planning something initially, and the transition happened so quickly from we were going to stay open to we weren't going to stay open. First and foremost, it was so important to remember that this is the first time. Like, none of us have been through a closure like this. None of us have been through a global pandemic. So remembering that it's the first time and being kind to ourselves, and then just leaning in accordingly. Like you mentioned earlier, Wednesday too, to assess what platforms that we already had. So we already had a Facebook page. We already
you didn't finish the rice. You always food and you didn't finish.
And
Dáselo a ese niño. Oh, sorry. You had salsa. Let me get the napkin. It's okay. Okay.
All right. Can everyone hear me? Okay. So to assess those types of things, we jumped in really fast, and people who said that they were not comfortable being on video very quickly got comfortable being on video. So if you're hesitating doing it, I guarantee you it is not as scary as you think it's going to be. So if you haven't tried it yet, try it and be open to it. And we also have really great relationships with our parents and families. And so being transparent through the process. We've never done this before. Does this work for you? What do you like about it? What do you not like about it? Constantly reassessing timing. We initially were doing events at the same time we generally did events at the center, and very, very rapidly learned that that doesn't work anymore, because parents who have older children at home are now homeschooling, or they're also doing their 40 to 50 hours a week of work. So we transitioned into some evening meetings as well, and then also prepped with what information can you give us beforehand so we can maybe condense this meeting to not be a full hour, but answering questions over a half hour. We have a number of social media platforms, so advertising when we would be having those events, and then we also would record them so we could repost them on YouTube and also a private Facebook group, so families that were not able to attend could access them at their leisure.
Awesome. So as you're talking, I hear you saying that you are working with your staff. For those providers here, or programs that oversee people or will have to work with staff to kind of get buy-in. How did you support staff on the journey to being comfortable or making the transition? How did you provide guidance and mentorship for your staff?
I have one of my teachers here right now, Mark Morano, and he is also our unofficial tech person. One of the first things that we did was really doing a team meeting where we practiced Zoom together. So we all admired Mark's virtual background from the beginning, and then he literally walked us through how to do that. Also showing some more of the fun features that some of these platforms offer to get people to buy in. And again, we did a lot of work around, this is the first time. We don't know how to do this. This is not something that we planned. The 1st of March, I actually shared an article with our families and staff that was titled, "There's no such thing as online preschool." And then on March 17th, I was like, wrong, there is, and we're about to do it. So leaning into that, having a sense of humor, and knowing that things are going to happen. We've had teachers that have hosted a class meeting via Facebook Live and their internet crashed. And a teacher that was not prepared to take over had to jump in, but just being really honest and transparent and saying, well, things happen, and here we go. So it's been a big learning curve, but we have found, I feel like our team is closer than before, just because we've learned this together and kind of all gone through this together.
Awesome, thank you. So in doing, it sounds like the teachers have been very creative in doing a lot of different things. How have your families responded to the virtual events?
I think it's a mixed bag. I think they're very grateful that we're offering different types of virtual events and opportunities to connect, but I think there's also a lot of resentment, not for the systems itself, but the situation that we're in, and that it's so hard to find any type of work-life balance. So we really try and meet our families where they are and know that some weeks they may tune in and some weeks they don't. It really, for us too, listening to them and what works best for them. So definitely recording options to make available for them to view later, changing the times on things, those type, all of those things, because it just really depends on the day. I mean, you could ask me how this is going and I could say it's great, and then an hour later say, this is horrible, please get me out of this house. And I think it's the same for them. I know that they appreciate the connections and that we're making these available for them, but it's a strange time.
Awesome. And then just kind of in reflecting on these past several months, what have been some of your major successes, and what are some lessons that you've learned along the way that you can share?
Some major successes. One, my team is phenomenal. For them to have pivoted in a matter of less than a day, for people who were saying like, I'm not going to be on camera, to here's a YouTube video that I produced last night in my driveway. I'm like, what? So definitely that. The connections that we formed, I really think that virtual connections have allowed us to connect with families that may not have been as comfortable in person. We'll definitely continue using virtual meetings even after the center reopened, because some families are not comfortable talking in front of a group or talking in a different setting. So this has allowed them a platform to ask their questions and share information. Also, families have connected with each other. I believe Sandra said that as well. We've had families set up virtual play dates, and also one-on-one connections with teachers has been huge. That's not something that's really possible in real life, not for very long, but us being able to work remotely and be paid to do our regular hours, teachers have scheduled one-on-one, even just 10 to 15 minute sessions with families, but as well as children, and to really gain new insight and information. Also realizing that it is a privilege to be invited into someone's home. So when we are working remotely and a family is allowing you to see where they live and be in their home, that we need to really recognize how, what a respectful partnership that is to have that. And so never forgetting that.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I think these are some really, really great lessons and successes. I think the final question that I have for you personally, how have you grown? How have you adapted throughout this whole transition into virtual events for families?
Again, it depends on the time of day that you are asking me, but I'm definitely more tech savvy than I thought. I would be a person that would say, oh, I don't know how to do that. And you know what? I do know how to do it. And if I didn't know how to do it, I learned how to do it really, really quickly. And I really try and live my life by the motto of do things that scare you, because that makes you grow. And so there have been times where I've agonized about, okay, I don't know if this is the right way to do this, but leaning into it. And I've been really proud of myself for learning so many new things. And definitely it will inform the way I do things in the future as well. And we'll keep a lot of these things even when we are back in real life, but I cannot wait to get out of here.
That's awesome. Thank you. Is there anything else that you would like to share with everybody on this call before we jump into some Q&A?
We have, oh yeah, another thing I wanted to add is make it easy for people to connect. So that's a huge thing. So definitely email the Zoom link and also follow up with other information on how people can find that. And really keep in mind that just because you're familiar with these platforms, other people might not be. So really make it as easy as possible, and then don't assume that, oh, everybody knows how to do that now. So being really supportive of that. Also, if you're hosting an event, if you can have other people that are part of your team be there as well, and then divide up the responsibilities. So like today you had a waiting room, if I can assign somebody to be in charge of the waiting room so my attention is not so divided, or monitoring the chat. And that's also been a great way to get some more of our team members to have buy-in, is giving them small responsibilities that can then grow into their comfort in hosting these events themselves.
Awesome, fantastic. Well, thank you for sharing your expertise and your experiences. We greatly appreciate it, Stacey. It's always awesome to hear how programs are just being so adaptable in a time that feels so much more restrictive than what we're used to. So my hope is that all of you were able to learn something new, that all of you were able to get some ideas, get a fresh perspective. But with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing so that we can all see each other, quote unquote. And I want to open up the floor to see if anybody has any questions, any comments. You can throw them in the group chat. You can also use the raise hand feature to let us know if you would like to speak, or you just, I guess, unmute yourself and jump on. But are there any questions, any comments, any follow-up information that you all would be interested in receiving from either us or our guest speakers today? Awesome. So I see a lot, I've seen a few comments about that the information was really, really useful. And I really, I'm glad that it was of use to you. One of the things that I think is really important to echo that came from both our presenters today is just be willing to try. It's not gonna look the way you think it's gonna look the first time around. It's not going to be perfect. You know, yes, sometimes your internet goes down right in the middle of an event. I've been doing Facebook and Instagram lives, and someone will call me right in the middle, just like happened with Miss Sandra. And so you have to, you know, decline and keep going as if nothing happened. I've had the internet kick me off. We've had issues with connectivity. I've had issues. I don't know if you've heard, you know, my son's screaming in the background because all of his friends are on Fortnite right now. So we have, you know, it's very much real life. And I think as you think about, as you start planning virtual events, remember that this is not a normal situation. We are all at home. We are all human. We all share our homes. We share our lives with people. So, you know, as much as I tell my son, you know, I'm on a call, you know, when he dies in Fortnite, that elicits an emotional response from him. So, you know, we issue a friendly reminder and we move on. You know, from 12:30 to 1:30 is lunchtime. So occasionally they'll be crawling on the floor behind me to get to the kitchen because they're hungry. So all of those things are just kind of, they're human, right? And so just like that, your families will also have human experiences where their kids will have a meltdown in front of the camera. Their kids won't want to be on camera. You know, the older child will have a Zoom, and then the younger child will have a Zoom, and then husband will come home and dinner's boiling. And so things happen. And I think the most important thing, one of the most important things to take from this is that we are all learning through this process. We are here to support you. We are here to offer any sort of support and resources that we can to all of you. We hope that you learned something today that is new, that you didn't, some piece of information that you didn't have before you walked in today, or before you sat down today. So with that being said, we're about 4 minutes away from being done. I appreciate all of your time. Before you log off, I just ask that you put your name again in the chat so that we can make sure that we caught everybody in the beginning and are able to give everybody credit for their attendance today. You all are awesome. You all do incredible work every single day. You all change lives. You all improve your communities. You all strengthen families. And for that, I thank you. And all of your communities, thank you. Continue to do great work. Continue to stay strong. It's not easy juggling home and work, but definitely lean in, reach out for support. If any of you ever just want to chat, I'm here at home all day too. So send me an email. We can jump on a Zoom, have a quick FaceTime. I'm always happy to support all of you. With that being said, have a beautiful rest of your day, rest of your week, and we look forward to seeing you at a future Lunch and Learn or at a future event. Have a good one.